please join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we have the pleasure of listening to alumni Lieutenant Rosenthal. She'll be speaking to us today. First, a couple reminders. Tomorrow class begins at 8 a.m. because of the debate we're having here in the Brown Auditorium at 10:15 after third period. School it out at 2:45 for clubs. And we have another assembly on Friday to watch the dance company performances. So just keep that in mind, and it's my pleasure to introduce Tommy McCauley, who will be introducing our speaker.
It is my pleasure today to introduce Lieutenant Hannah Rosenthal. First Lieutenant Hannah Rosenthal grew up in Houston. She was a lifer at Kinkaid and graduated in 2006. She attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, where she studied English literature and Arabic, graduating in 2010 as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Lieutenant Rosenthal chose the Military Intelligence Branch and spent 4 months at Army's Intelligence Center of Excellence at Fort Huachacha, Arizona, stopping first to complete the Army's Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia. Lieutenant Rosenthal currently serves the 1st Brigade Combat Team, 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. She recently returned from a 7-month deployment to eastern Afghanistan, where she was responsible for a platoon of tactical unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, as well as the brigade's counter-IED cell. Back at Fort Bragg, Lieutenant Rosenthal is taking over as the executive officer of a military intelligence company and jumping out of as many airplanes and helicopters as she can as a certified jump master. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Hannah Rosenthal.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Halloween, though it looks like I'm the only one that came in costume. I'd like to start out by thanking all of you for having me here today. Special thanks to Mr. North for all my teachers and coaches from Kinkaid, family and friends, without whom I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today dressed like this. 6 years ago, I sat where you are and joined advisories listening to various speakers, wondering who they were and what they had to say that someone deemed important enough for the whole upper school to hear. And here I am, never thinking in all my years at Kinkaid, and I was a lifer since pre-K, that I would be standing in front of the school. When I graduated from Kinkaid in 2006, instead of spending a leisurely summer wondering what college would be like or what I would major in, all the usual, I was preparing mentally and physically for cadet basic training, which is affectionately called Beast Barracks. It's West Point's induction system for new cadets into the United States military. I decided to attend West Point as a way of giving back, to experience something completely foreign and new. To be honest, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. For 6 weeks, we ran in the rain at 5 a.m., toted rifles everywhere, changed in and out of 10 different uniforms in record time, memorized random bits of knowledge, got lost in the woods, and did endless push-ups. It's what you'd expect of the military, the Army in particular, a certain rigidity and a propensity towards mud and rain. They always know exactly when to send you outside. It was truly an experience unlike anything I had been through before. I played in plenty of muddy soccer games at Kinkaid, but I've never dove into a swamp trying to make a time limit on a land navigation course. The old adage holds true that every new experience teaches you a little more about yourself. And that's my first challenge to you, to do something completely new and outside your comfort zone, different than anything you've ever done before. You never know what you'll find out about yourself, about others, and about the world. So, when the summer training rolled ceremoniously into the academic year, I trudged through West Point's core curriculum for a year and a half, despising physics, before I chose to study English and Arabic, working towards a double major. Studying literature in a military environment was fun, almost rebellious in such a history and engineering-oriented institution. I had wonderful teachers who taught us to analyze and understand our environment through the glass of literature, which acted sometimes like a mirror and sometimes like a camera with different settings. There was always another way to look at a situation, every type of situation. My double major allowed me to spend a semester abroad, an experience I would recommend to all of you. I studied for 6 months at the American University of Cairo in Cairo, Egypt, and lived just minutes from downtown, right on the Nile. While I wouldn't recommend going to Cairo right about now, I would highly recommend that you find some sort of abroad activity, whether for a summer, just a short amount of time, or a full semester or a year. We traveled around the Middle East on weekends and discovered a whole new worldview. Not necessarily one that I completely agreed with, but there's no substitute for seeing and studying countries who view history with a completely different spin. And this has been one of my favorite things about the Army. I've traveled to places I never thought I would go, and learned more than I ever thought I would. I'll touch on Afghanistan in just a minute, but you'll never know the world if you don't go see it. That's my second challenge to you. Travel as much as you can. Actually get out and see the world. West Point continued to challenge me on a daily basis, and oftentimes, I wished I was at a normal school, where I could go to class only in the afternoon, 3 days a week, and wear pajamas. Especially when it was freezing cold, with icy winds and sleet, and I had to walk to the furthest building at 7 a.m. If you asked me would I do it all over again, maybe, maybe not, but I wouldn't trade my experiences for anything. The friends I made at West Point and in the Army are like family spread out all over the world. Studying history at the Academy and simply walking around made clear to all of us cadets that we are all living history and that the state of the world tomorrow depends on our actions today. That's a very heavy concept, but I believe it's very important to understand. Most of us sitting here have very strong parents, family members, who shape pieces of the world every day in their jobs as doctors, lawyers, businessmen, teachers, and many others. Most of our grandparents fought in previous wars from World War II on, and the world today is a direct result of their actions decades ago. War is a very harsh, drastic way of changing the world very quickly, and it should always be the last resort. And I promise you that no one wishes for peace more than a soldier, especially in combat. So with all that rich history and tradition in mind, I graduated from West Point in May 2010 as a second lieutenant, unsure what the big Army, as it's called, would be like. I went to airborne school, where I learned to jump out of airplanes at 800 to 1,200 feet above the ground and land without breaking anything, most of the time. I've been lucky so far. If you want to very quickly overcome natural human instincts, this is the place to do it. My mother thinks it's a terrible idea to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, and I'm not allowed to tell her I'm jumping until after I've landed. But I love it, and to be fair, the military owns nothing that's perfectly good. After airborne school, I studied at the Army's Intelligence Center of Excellence and trained to be an intelligence officer, and then I moved to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and joined the 1st Brigade Combat Team in the 82nd Airborne Division. A year later, I deployed to Afghanistan. My brigade deployed on extremely short notice in February 2012 and returned throughout the past month. I've been back a little bit over a month now, and it's true that there's no place like home. As much as you can't wait to leave home now, soon you'll be missing it and very happy to come back. Never ever forget where you came from. So much happened in such a short amount of time in Afghanistan that I'm still processing a lot of it. Combat's an experience unlike any other. It's a constant state of stress and uncertainty, where every decision and action has extremely severe consequences. I deployed as the Tactical Unmanned Aerial Systems, or TUAS, platoon leader, responsible for 18 men and 4 Shadow surveillance drones. My soldiers flew the Shadows on aerial reconnaissance missions 24 hours a day for troops on the ground, driving the roads and walking from village to village. Aside from having overall responsibility for everything the platoon did and failed to do, My job consisted of mission planning, interfacing with our overall intelligence apparatus, and ensuring that the platoon had everything they needed to operate at their best. I also worked as part of the unit's counter-IED cell, a piece of our intelligence operations. I tracked IED events and details and used patterns to try and predict the next IED. I learned real fear and saw true courage, because there's no faking it in conditions like that. The notion of giving your life for your country is very real for a soldier, especially in a combat environment. You hope it never happens, but unfortunately, you're never surprised when it does. My unit lost 8 men on our deployment. I've also lost 3 of my West Point classmates and more friends from school who graduated in previous and following years than I care to count. It's something you never get used to, and it never gets any easier. Injuries are the other harsh reality. 3 of my classmates have lost limbs, and one of them lost both of his legs. A soldier in my unit became the Army's 4th ever quadruple amputee. Their strength is truly remarkable. If you ever have a minute, research First Lieutenant Nicholas Vogt or Staff Sergeant Travis Mills to see what real strength and courage looks like. They're still alive, and they're still fighting and still trying to serve in the military. I'm eternally grateful to have made it back home to this wonderful country with all of my soldiers alive and unhurt. There's nothing like experiencing a truly unfortunate situation to make you appreciate all that you have here in America. Never forget the opportunities and freedoms we enjoy here in the U.S. Never take them for granted, and never forget to say thank you. And this brings me to my main challenge to you. With some help from President John F. Kennedy with a quote I'm sure you've heard 100 times over. But he famously said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." You have to find your own answer to that question, but you cannot forget to ask the question. Kinkaid affords us so many resources, makes us better educated, more capable. This immense fortune gives us an even greater responsibility to give back. Service to others is the great equalizer, and one of the greatest opportunities we have. To do something greater than yourself, to help others. My path, through my own volition, took me into the military, but there are so many options out there. There are big organizations, many small, local opportunities, through the government, and through just about anywhere. You can find them, but make sure you at least look. No matter where you take your life, find some way to give back. I wanted to close with just a few of the things I've learned that I'd like to pass on to you. First, never let yourself stop being surprised. I'm constantly amazed at the things I do, things that I get to do, things that I have to do. From jumping out of airplanes to certifying and load planning hazardous cargo for air shipment. Sitting in classes at Kinkaid, I could never have imagined myself carrying a weapon around for 7 months, which is not very pleasant, or inspecting parachutes before jumps, and then issuing jump commands to 100 jumpers on an Air Force C-17 with the doors open. Those are the fun things. Property inventory, arms rooms inspections, endless paperwork are far less fun, but still not things I'd ever thought I'd do. Second, always take something away from every situation. You will do it unconsciously, but try to internalize and understand. I may disagree with my boss's way of doing things, but the benefit I gain is learning how I don't want to act when I'm in the same position in the future. Take something away from every situation, good things and bad. And finally, never forget what a great country we live in and what wonderful opportunities we've been afforded living here and attending Kinkaid. Take pride in your accomplishments and use all you gain here to achieve even higher. Make a difference and find your own way to give back and change the world around you. Thank you. West Point, the Army, Afghanistan, anything you want to know. It was in high school. I actually had a very good friend, another Kinkaid graduate, who was very, very interested in it. One of those people who always knew he wanted to go. That was not me. I did not always know I wanted to go. But I went there for a summer program and was actually very surprised at how much I liked it and something that I really wanted to do.
What was it like being a fourth-year cadet at the academy?
First year, as it's called, is your senior year. Oh, you mean freshman year?
No, fourth year.
So like your last year?
Yeah.
First year was great, mostly because you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You get your ring, you have the most privileges, and you get very excited about what the future holds. You also get very scared, realizing that in a couple months you'll be back at the bottom again. You'll be standing in front of men who are sometimes twice your age, with families who've been to Iraq and Afghanistan 3, 4, 5 times, and you're supposed to be in charge of them, telling them what to do. It's very daunting, and so you spend a lot of time trying to be as prepared as possible. First of all, so that you can actually graduate, and second of all, so that you don't want to mess it up.
I think you were the only woman in your platoon or among the only women in your platoon. Can you talk about the experience of being a woman among men and if that made any difference or what it was like for you there in Afghanistan?
Well, in Afghanistan, the main thing is that if there is even a restroom for women, it's probably extremely far away. I was the only woman in my platoon, however, not in my company. My battalion that I'm in actually has the highest percentage of women in the brigade. And while my brigade is an infantry brigade combat team, and they don't let women in the infantry yet, I'm sure that's coming soon. The way that they rearranged the Army about 10 years ago has actually put women more on the front lines than they've ever been before, because they end up in the same austere conditions and faraway outposts as the rest of the infantry guys. So I lived in a tent right next door to a bunch of guys, and they of course segregate as much as possible, and I usually have to wait a really long time. We had shower hours. I had 2 hours a day where women could shower, so trying to fit that in. But those are little trivial logistical things. It didn't seem to me that there was that much of a difference, and I thoroughly enjoyed my job. I thoroughly enjoyed working with all my soldiers. At West Point, didn't feel I was treated any differently. Didn't feel like there was any problem. I think women have been in the military, close to the front lines for long enough now that people are starting to get used to it, and it's not such a strange thing anymore.
What was one of the hardest missions your platoon ever went through?
That would be when we crashed one of our aircraft. We actually crashed two while we were there. We were fortunate enough to get them both back. But the second crash, some local Afghans actually got to it before we did. And they put it on their tractor. And I was talking with the guys who were supposed to go out and pick it up for us. And they said, no, so these local farmers have it. We think they're coming back to the base. And we were in a very small outpost in the middle of nowhere. And every time I called, they said, well, they actually just went by the gate. we don't know where they are. So it took us about 3 hours to find where these locals had taken our aircraft. And as you know, it's really bad when we don't get these $1 million pieces of equipment back, especially ones with sensitive cameras on them. So we were a little worried for a minute, but we did manage to get them back, and I actually had to send some of my own guys out to go pick it up, which is not a mission that they're used to, being pilots. So that was definitely one of the most nerve-wracking missions we ever went through.
Did you have much encounters with local Afghanis, or were you able to get off your outpost?
I did by virtue of being assigned a second job. When I was working in the counter IED cell, I made sure to get myself out on some patrols because as an intelligence officer, I thought it was vitally important that I actually see the ground in the area that I'm supposed to be the expert on. I'm supposed to be telling all of these infantry guys where to go, how to avoid the IEDs, and in order to best tell them that, I felt like I had to see the ground first. So I did go out on some missions. Some we drove, some we walked the whole way, and we always ended up going into villages. And oftentimes I was the only female, so I usually ended up going in to speak with the women, to search them. A lot of men actually wouldn't let the soldiers into their homes unless I went in first. So that was an incredible experience. It was not one that I trained a lot for, but I learned a lot, and I actually got to see the people and country of Afghanistan, which is something that not a lot of females and definitely not a lot of intelligence officers can say.
Do you think the United States will be ready to withdraw by 2014?
That is a big question, and what you don't hear, you hear big overarching talk. Actually, you haven't heard a whole lot of talk about it in the debates and in the recent election. You hear a lot of big overarching themes from politicians about Afghanistan, them being ready to govern themselves. But the details that you don't see is just the sheer amount of stuff that we have over there. I mean, we took over a lot of old Russian stuff and added a lot of our own. So just the logistical aspect coupled with the security aspect is going to take a lot of planning, and they're already, of course, working on lots of drawdown plans. It will be extremely complicated, extremely difficult. However, if the president, whoever that may be, says you will be gone by this day, then we will be gone by this day.
Are you plan on pursuing a career in the military?
That I'm still trying to decide. From West Point, I incurred a 5-year commitment in return for not having to pay for college. That's what I owe. So my commitment is up in 2015, and at that point I'll have to make a decision. It depends on if I like the job I'm in at the time. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of teaching options, grad school options. There's a lot of really great programs offered through the military. But then there's also a lot outside the military. So I haven't decided yet, but it'll depend probably over the next year or so on what kind of jobs and options I'm looking at.
One more clue. My brother was also an intelligence officer in Afghanistan, and have you done a lot of reading about the Middle East and other history and stuff?
Yes. At West Point, we were sort of forced to read some of it, but I'm an avid reader myself because I love to read, and reading the paper, reading books, especially recently there's a lot of great books about Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East as a whole. I would highly recommend that, along with fiction, that you all read newspapers at least once a day and pick up a book about, another country, another place. Pick up a history book. Understanding the history. One of my favorite quotes is, "The farther back you look, the farther forward you will see." And I think that has a lot to do with reading and understanding the history of parts of the world. You understand how they operate.
It's always great to have an alum come back to the school and share their experience with you. I think more importantly, in this case, I think we're grateful for Lieutenant Rosenthal's service and her sacrifice. So keep that in mind as Veterans Day is on the horizon. You are dismissed.